primary wins for Trump and Sanders. Will they impact the direction of the presidential race? Withholding support. He has lots of delegates, but Donald Trump still lacks support of leading Republicans. New protection for unborn babies. How one state tries to shield them from the pain of abortion. And prodigal son, faithful father. Pope Francis uses a familiar parable to illustrate God's infinite mercy. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, May 11th, 2016. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick, and Donald Trump wins 2 more presidential primaries. Bernie Sanders continues to challenge Hillary Clinton. Chief White House correspondent and political director Lauren Ashburn begins our team coverage.
Brian, no surprise, Donald Trump won virtually all the delegates at stake in the West Virginia and Nebraska primaries. He now has 92% of those needed for the Republican presidential nomination. On the Democrat side, Hillary Clinton loses another state to her rival.
We've won a big victory in West Virginia.
Don't count out Bernie Sanders just yet.
This is a state, West Virginia, where Hillary Clinton won by over 40 points against Barack Obama in 2008.
Hillary Clinton has turned her focus away from him and onto the presumptive GOP nominee, Donald Trump.
I am looking forward to debating Donald Trump come the fall.
Trump, running unopposed, picked up wins in West Virginia and Nebraska. The delegates awarded push him closer to the 1237 needed to officially close out the Republican nomination.
Right now, this country is stalled so badly, and taxes are going to go down, and that's one of the ways we're going to get it to work.
Here's where the presidential race stands now. The Associated Press says Trump has 1,107 of the 1237 delegates he needs. And thanks to superdelegates, Clinton is just 143 delegates short of winning the Democratic nomination. She has 2,240 to Sanders' 1,473. The magic number for Democrats, 2,383. The next primaries take place Tuesday in Kentucky and Oregon. Brian?
Lauren, thank you. New polls show Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton virtually tied in key swing states. The Quinnipiac University poll shows Clinton with a slight edge in Florida and Pennsylvania, 43 to 42%, but Trump edges Clinton in Ohio, 43 to 39%. Since 1960, no candidate has been elected president without taking at least 2 of these 3 states. Perhaps Trump's biggest challenge now is healing a fractured Republican Party. He hopes to make a start tomorrow, meeting with House Speaker Paul Ryan and other congressional Republicans. Jason Calvi is at the Capitol tonight with a preview. Jason?
Brian, it's a battle over the future direction of the Republican Party. Speaker Paul Ryan last week flexing his political muscles, saying he was unable at that time to endorse Donald Trump. Now Speaker Ryan says Republicans must do the difficult work of coming together. Speaker Ryan says tomorrow's meeting is just the beginning of uniting the party. He says it's needed because Republicans cannot afford to lose to Hillary Clinton.
To pretend we're unified as a party after coming through a very bruising primary, which just ended like a week ago, to pretend we're unified without actually unifying, then we go into the fall at half strength.
Senator Ted Cruz is just back to the Senate after bowing out of the race. The conservative Texan hasn't yet backed Trump, and he tells us he has no plans to meet Trump tomorrow. What issues does he need to address to get the conservative vote, the pro-life vote?
Listen, from my perspective and the perspective of millions of voters, we are looking for a president who will fight to reduce the burdens of the federal government on small businesses, to return us to the free market principles that built this country, who will defend the constitutional liberties that protect each and every American, whether it's the Second Amendment or religious liberty.
Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions is a top Trump ally on Capitol Hill. Speaker Ryan has policy differences with Trump on things like Trump's proposal to temporarily ban Muslims from the country.
This is a big tent party. There is plenty of room for different policy disputes in this party. We come from different wings of the party. The goal here is to unify the various wings of the party around common principles so we can go forward unified.
Speaker Ryan didn't give any specifics about what he and Trump will speak about in two private meetings tomorrow. We'll see how the author, Donald Trump, the author of the best-selling book, The Art of the Deal, does in negotiating with Speaker Paul Ryan. Brian?
Jason Calvi in the Capitol. Thank you, Jason. And Donald Trump says he may ask former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani to study his proposed ban on Muslims entering the U.S. Giuliani earlier called Trump's idea unconstitutional. Trump told Fox News that Giuliani could possibly lead a commission to review his immigration policies. Ted Cruz suspended his presidential campaign but would like to remain in the U.S. Senate. He announced plans to run for re-election from Texas. Florida Senator Marco Rubio made the opposite decision, saying he is leaving the Senate when his term ends. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Planned Parenthood sues Ohio's health department. That federal suit claims a new state law violates the organization's constitutional rights. Ohio is one of several states passing laws to block public funds from supporting groups performing or promoting abortions. Utah's requirement that unborn children receive anesthesia or painkillers before some abortions takes effect this week. That law requires pain relief for a child in the womb before any abortion at 20 weeks of gestation or later. The governor signed the measure earlier this year. State Senator Kurt Bramble, who sponsored the measure, says if a child could experience pain, we have an obligation to protect that child. President Obama signs the Defend Trade Secret Act into law this afternoon. It authorizes victims to file a civil action in a U.S. district court if someone tries to steal their trade secrets. They can sue for an injunction to block the use of the secret. They can also sue for damages. 3 bombings in Baghdad bring today's death toll to at least 93, with about 165 wounded. 5 police officers were among 18 people killed by a suicide car bomb that targeted a police station. In northern Baghdad, at least 7 people died and 22 were wounded in a suicide attack. Earlier today, a car bombing at an outdoor market in Sadr City killed at least 63 people. Islamic State terrorists claim responsibility. A former GOP lawmaker challenges the White House and Congress to step up the fight against radical Islam. Frank Wolf says more must be done to protect religious minorities from terrorist groups in Nigeria. Wyatt Goolsby, who spoke with Wolf, joins us from the Capitol tonight. Wyatt?
Brian, when you think of the world's worst terrorist organizations, you probably think of ISIS or Al-Qaeda, but former Congressman Frank Wolf joined others, at least here on Capitol Hill, in saying that Boko Haram is the world's most dangerous organization. That statement was echoed during a hearing at the House Foreign Affairs Committee led by Congressman Chris Smith. Human rights advocates in Nigeria spoke about Boko Haram's frequent attacks. They also expressed concern about other emerging threats from radical groups. Nigeria's military is fighting with Shiites backed by Iran, and that has led to hundreds of deaths just this year, and Christians are paying the price.
The Christians are the one, some Muslims too, but the Christians are mainly the ones who are being persecuted, because of their faith. And the Christians have said, well, does anybody in the West care about us?
Wolf says the U.S. government needs to step in to prevent these conflicts. Also at today's hearing was one of the 276 schoolgirls abducted by Boko Haram a little over 2 years ago. Sa, who escaped from the group after the abduction, asked for Americans to pray that her friends are set free. Now, most of Boko Haram's attacks are in Nigeria, but they're not limited there. They've also carried out several bombings in major cities in nearby countries like Niger and Cameroon. Brian?
Thank you, Wyatt. And Lauren Ashburn also questioned White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest today about Boko Haram.
Lauren.
On Capitol Hill today, there is a meeting, a hearing about Boko Haram, and one of the people who are testifying is a schoolgirl who was abducted. What the lawmakers are saying is that Boko Haram is the most dangerous terrorist organization. Does the White House agree with that, or does that honor go to Al-Qaeda and ISIS?
Well, obviously the President understands how dangerous Boko Haram is. That is why we have devoted significant resources to assisting the Nigerian government and building up their capacity to confront Boko Haram in their country. We're mindful of that threat, and we understand the terrible violence that they've perpetrated against innocent people, not just in Nigeria, but across that region.
Ernest would not say if Boko Haram is the most dangerous. He said they are very violent, adding the U.S. is working with Nigeria to stop the terrorist organization from expanding its foothold. Dr. Robert George chairs the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. We're grateful to have you with us. 3 suicide bombings in Baghdad today targeting Shia Muslims, a minority like Christians. Is there any hope for religious freedom in that region?
It's obviously a very, very bad situation. These were attacks by ISIS, which is, of course, a Sunni Muslim entity, against the Shia minority. Of course, in other places, it's the other way around, where you have Shia attacking Sunnis. At the same time, you have Christians who are being very brutally persecuted by ISIS and by other elements in the Middle East, including in Syria and in Iraq. So the situation is deteriorating, I'm afraid. Is there hope? Well, there's always hope. Yeah. We can't give up hope, and we need to support those elements within Iran, and they are there. We need to find an effective way to support those elements that will stand up for religious freedom, not just for their own group, but for everybody.
In Iraq, I think you meant, but let's look at Iran and Russia as we look at the recently released report that your organization came out. What are the alarming trends that you see in religious freedom violations?
Well, there are a number of them. First, you have places like Russia and Iran where the situation is deteriorating. The repression is getting worse. Now, it's considerably worse in Iran than it is in Russia, but you hate to see Russia going the wrong way. You'd like to see Russia moving forward toward greater civil liberty, and especially in the area of freedom of religion. In Iran, there had been a lot of hope when Rouhani came into office. He was meant to be a reformer and so forth. Well, it turns out he's all talk and no action. The situation there for any minority religious group, including Christians, is bad, and it's getting worse. And then if you look outside of the area of state actors to non-state actors, what do we see? Well, we see organizations like ISIS and al-Qaeda, which has not gone away or been completely absorbed into ISIS, by the way. Or in Nigeria, Boko Haram, non-state actors wreaking havoc, mayhem, murdering, enslaving, torturing, raping, with governments able to do very little about it. So the situation is really bad, and it's getting worse, I'm afraid.
Dr. Robert George, chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Coming up, Pope Francis delves into the familiar story, the prodigal son, as an example of divine mercy. And Dr. Grazie Christie warns Catholic hospitals face a deadly vendetta. Pope Francis continues to develop the theme of God's mercy in this Jubilee year. He dissected one of the most familiar New Testament parables during his weekly preaching and teaching in St. Peter's Square today. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. Alan Holdren, Rome Bureau Chief for EWTN's Catholic News Agency, is joining us. Alan, how did the Holy Father use the parable of the prodigal son to teach about the mercy of God today?
Well, Brian, he said that in this parable, the father of the prodigal son shows his mercy, his forgiveness and his love of his son, just like the Heavenly Father does. The Pope said that this is an example for all people to continue to show that love that the Heavenly Father gives to us. This is a message that he's continued to emphasize in this year of mercy. He said that it doesn't matter what your actions or your merits are. God's mercy is for everyone, and not even the devil can get in the way of that.
Now, there are two sons in this story. The one, of course, ran off, the prodigal. The other stayed home, doing what he was supposed to do, but then became resentful. Did the Holy Father speak about both?
He did. He spoke about this older son, saying that often, even though people are very close to the Father, they may feel justified in their actions, they also may err, as was the case with this older brother. He said they also are in need of God's mercy. Here's this brother who thinks that he's in the right, but he also has lost the message that God's mercy is also for him and should be sharing in that joy of the Father.
And finally, what's the reaction from Italian bishops on today's vote in Italy on same-sex civil unions?
Well, we heard a very disappointed reaction from one of the bishops, the second in charge of the Italian Bishops' Conference. Yesterday, Bishop Nunzio Galantino said it was a defeat for everyone. He said that family policies in favor of a family composed of a mother, a father, and children need to be given due respect. And in this case, in Italy, he said it's not just an issue that's at the heart of the church, but it's something that should be at the heart of all society for the good of society. Brian?
Alan Holdren from Rome. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Brian.
And as Alan mentioned, Italy's lower chamber of deputies votes today to approve same-sex civil unions despite opposition from the Catholic Church. Italy is the last nation in the European Union to do so. Today's vote, 372 to 51, with 99 abstaining. The measure grants inheritance and medical decision-making rights, but it does not allow gay adoption. Israel's Independence Day celebrations begin tonight, but a decision to honor a Greek Orthodox priest during the main ceremony is causing some controversy. Father Gabriel Nadaf is one of 14 torchlighters chosen for their outstanding contributions to the state. He is being recognized for his efforts to encourage members of Israel's tiny Christian community to enlist in the Israeli army. He says army service better integrates Christians into a society where they often encounter discrimination. His recruitment drive has deeply divided the country's Christian Arabs, making up just 2% of Israel's total population. Brazil's Senate votes on whether or not to impeach President Dilma Rousseff. The majority of senators blaming her for endemic corruption are expected to vote for impeachment. Rousseff is accused of using fiscal tricks to manage the federal budget. Pope Francis today called for prayer and dialogue in addressing the political and financial crisis in Latin America's largest country. A Catholic physician says the American Civil Liberties Union has a deadly vendetta against Catholic hospitals. In a recent op-ed for the New York Post, Dr. Grazie Christie writes, "The ACLU is angry that Catholic hospitals won't perform abortions." She says the so-called Civil Liberties Organization appears to again be revving up to sue Americans who dedicated their lives to saving others while serving their faith. Dr. Grazie Christie joining us by Skype from Miami. Gracie's a radiologist and policy advisor with the Catholic Association. Now, you say the ACLU is trying to get the people riled up over this. How do you see that plan backfiring?
Well, it's backfiring because the ACLU has pointed out the really impressive fact that the Catholic Church is a huge player in healthcare in the United States. 1 in 6 patients in a hospital bed today is being cared for in a Catholic institution.
In fact, doesn't the Catholic Church have a centuries-long history of caring for the sick?
The Catholic Church invented hospitals. It's a way of embodying Christ's mercy and concern for the sick that he showed when he was among us in his lifetime, and also a way for us to remember that Christ's face is in the face of our brothers and sisters, and we need to take care of them when they're sick.
So in this deadly vendetta, as you call it, what is the American Civil Liberties Union looking for? What do they want Catholic hospitals to do?
They want Catholic hospitals to give up Catholic morals and ethics and act in exactly the way the ACLU would act if they were running hospitals. They would perform abortions and also sterilizations, and this is something that the Catholic Church can't support because of our commitment to defend innocent human life.
Grazie, what do you think would happen to healthcare in America without Catholic hospitals?
Catholic hospitals are not only a big part of healthcare in the United States, they're also extremely good at what they do. There's nobody waiting on the wings to take care of the patients that the Catholic Church could not take care of if the ACLU had its way. So the people who will suffer are the poor and the sick if Catholic hospitals are forced out of healthcare.
So don't Catholic hospitals really set the bar for our standard of healthcare in this country?
They do. They consistently rate better in all sorts of ways over for-profit hospitals and especially government-run institutions.
It's good to have Dr. Grazie Christie with the Catholic Association joining us by Skype from Miami. Grazie, always good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, the convergence of faith and politics, how one Catholic couple navigates the two. And we show you how NASA discovers a host of new planets. Be fervent about the work you do and do it very well because it is a part of your sanctity. Wisdom from the late Mother Angelica on this Wednesday evening. We pray for the repose of Mother's soul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. A Catholic couple in the thick of presidential politics relies on faith as a compass. Lauren Ashburn spoke with them earlier.
Matt Schlapp is the chairman of the American Conservative Union. Mercedes Schlapp is a Republican strategist. And yes, they are husband and wife, Catholics who have 4 daughters. Mercedes, to you.
5. You missed one of our kids.
How did I miss a daughter?
It's easy to do. Sometimes we forget about it too. It's 5.
How do you do it?
Well, I have to say, it really is about having God in the center of our relationship, and we're far from perfect, and we struggle all the time. And making sure that we keep our marriage, communications, being able to just spend
I feel like
time
you're
together.
Communicating to me through Lauren. No, in all fairness, I'm a lucky husband because I have a wife who is constantly reminding me how important our faith is. And like a lot of people in politics and people in business, I'm very stubborn and think things should go the way I think they should go.
And that Mercedes says,
and Mercedes reminds me that there's someone above who sets our course. And it's a great, wonderful thing to live with somebody who's constantly reminding you of that.
To try to get the two of you together on this set was almost a miracle. I mean, you are working with Fox News. You also have your strategy piece. You are running all over the place. Yet you have 5 children and you make time for it to happen. What role do the children play in your career? I know you brought your daughter to CPAC.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you know, we are trying to thrust our faith onto our kids, but we're not trying to thrust our politics. But what's interesting is that in America today, faith and politics are so intertwined because family and the culture is on display every day on newspapers. And our kids are watching and listening and learning. They're picking up more than we ever could think. They're actually coming to me with really sophisticated questions. And so, yeah, my oldest daughter wanted to be at CPAC. And I said, you know, Viana, you don't have to be a conservative. You can be, you know, you're allowed to.
You can be a libertarian, but I don't know if I can be a Democrat.
Dad, please, I don't feel the burn. So I was like, okay, this is a deal.
My favorite is when the oldest says, well, you know, I definitely have to marry a conservative and a Catholic. Like, she pretty much drew the line there. But I think for us, Catholic school is very important. And I appreciate so much the Catholic teachers and the influence that they have in our children's lives. And the fact that they make faith such a center part of each of our children's lives.
But you remember, your kids save you. We all think that we're saving our kids. It's our kids that will remind us when we're busy, Dad, we haven't said grace. It's our kids that will say, Dad, we haven't said a rosary in a while. We should say a family rosary. It's the kids that constantly bring you back to your faith, and that's why those Catholic schools, they're so important.
That is so true, and I think that my youngest daughter one night said to me, Mommy, you forgot to say the Hail Mary. And I thought, oh my gosh, you're completely right. Now, in this world, in this secular world, it is very, very difficult to keep your faith. So tell me some of the ways, maybe on the weekends, or what you do with your children to keep that going, Mercedes.
Well, definitely we go to Mass on Sunday. I mean, that is critical. I think for us that routine is incredibly important, and even though we drag the 5 children and one of them might run down the middle of the aisle.
And the German likes to be on time to Mass, and the Latina, time is a little more relative, but you know.
But that's, I think, critical. Saying prayers with the children, bringing out the Bible and reading with them. Obviously, I think those are very important steps that the families have to take.
And we get them out of the city a lot. We go out to the country. We let them hang out with real people. And I think that's critical as well. Cities are great, but cities are also, you know, cramped, and you know, they don't need to be so cosmopolitan at such a young age. It's okay to get them out to the country and talk about the basics of life.
Well, the two of you are certainly role models for working parents everywhere. Thank you so much, Mercedes and Matchlab.
Thanks, Lauren.
Well, thank you, Lauren. NASA reveals an exciting new discovery. The space agency says it found more than 1,200 new planets using the powerful Kepler Space Telescope. You're looking at an artist's concept of these discoveries. Scientists say 1,300 additional objects may also be planets, but they need more study. On that note, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick, and we leave you tonight with these pictures from St. Peter's Square, where pilgrims and tourists gathered to see and hear Pope Francis today. Good night. God bless you.